Hi, my name is Andrea Walters and I'm an artist. I work with domestic violence and femicide, mainly because of my own personal history. I'm going to tell you about my most recent exhibition, which is entitled #OverMyDeadBody. Several years ago, I had an exhibition that was located in a small black gallery with a tiny slit so that each viewer had to squash their way through. And it reflected on my experiences of domestic violence. So what I did was I used umbrellas, red violence, love, lust. It has so many associations, but also the umbrella itself. You know, when it is pulled open and it's taut, it's that tension prior to the violence, and then of course when it's closed it dissipates. So you have that cyclical nature of how things work, really. And I had these umbrellas and embroidered them with different texts and did things like using a Walt Disney children's tablecloth where you've got Beauty and the Beast and Cinderella and the Prince, and I subverted it by turning them all upside down and putting electrical tape over the woman's eyes, because it was just a commentary on how even little girls are subtly taught that that is what they should aspire to, really. You know, the white horse, the prince, the rich guy going to carry off and all of that. And of course it doesn't really work out like that. So I had these different elements, and then I had 3 video texts that ran across the umbrellas. But the black walls were mirrored, and I had a mirror ball in the middle of the room, which just emphasized this madness of this relationship that I was speaking about, with club lighting, and then these 3 video texts that ran over the works. That the one was the threats, you leave me, you'll leave without anything, and all the rest of it. The second one was all the justifications, and the third one was the apologies. And of course they meander almost like snakes over the open umbrellas and up the walls while the rest of this craziness was going on. I was lucky enough to be invited to put that exhibition up elsewhere, and the day I was busy doing it was Valentine's Day. A whole lot of people came to me and said, have you heard about Oscar Pistorius? And of course I hadn't. So when I did that research, the fact that there were many similarities between her life and mine made me decide to work on that as a topic for the next exhibition. So it didn't go really well at all. I interviewed people from forensics, from ballistics, from lawyers, advocates that represent these guys who go around killing women. And I just didn't get anything. Anyway, eventually I was told to go to SAPS Ballistics. And I did, in Manzimtoti, and they were fantastic. They gave me a bag full of Kevlar offcuts. Now, Kevlar is used to make bullet-resistant vests, because they're not actually bulletproof, they are just resistant. So the offcuts, little squares, they stuff into these bags, these hard white plastic bags, and they test fire guns into them, guns that have been used in really serious crimes and homicides. So I squirreled through these Kevlar fragments and found where the bullets, the accelerant, had actually made marks, and in some cases even damaged the Kevlar. And I did a lot of research on Reeva Steenkamp, particularly social media, and I found her last post on Instagram 4 days before she died referred to Anene Booysen, who had a 17-year-old girl who had been gang raped by her ex-boyfriend and some of his friends and disemboweled, and she died. So Reeva Steenkamp's post was, I woke up in a safe, happy home this morning. Not everyone did. Rest in peace, Anene Booysen. So I left out the last little section because it just seemed insane that she could have posted that 4 days before Pistorius shot her. And I did these little Kevlar squares, and they're not all even or anything. That was not what I was concerned about. But in my own handwriting, because of all these parallels, I realized I could have been dead. So I did these squares. My mom helped, and my dear friend Shirley helped, embroidering the same message. I woke up in a safe, happy home. It has to be borne in mind that she wasn't living with Oscar, by the way. She actually lived elsewhere, so she wasn't referring to him. And I defragmented, pulled apart this Kevlar, and it turned into something like yellow candy floss. They warned me not to breathe it in, but since I was a smoker at the time, I wasn't too worried about my lungs. I ended up with this thing that was supposed to be on my face, like a rhino horn on the top of my head. But I got it done. And then as a response to Oscar, I did some big laser cut, they're about 1 meter in diameter, laser cut stainless steel medallions that reflected his sponsors, because before Oscar ran a step, he was making $3.5 million US from these sponsors, who had very unfortunate slogans in his adverts, like, "I am the bullet in the chamber," "part man, part God." And I mean, the whole exhibition questioned notions of accountability, you know, for this kind of toxic masculinity and where it starts and how it develops. And anyway, out of that work, body of work, I think my favorite piece was this one stainless steel medallion, which was actually 4 ladies' toilet signs forming the shape of a cross. And around them, instead of a laurel wreath, I had the plant that is commonly known as yesterday, today and tomorrow, which referenced the fact that women are being killed daily as, you know, as if they're rubbish. And it happened yesterday, and it certainly will happen tomorrow. And after that exhibition, I think that was what particularly resonated with me. And I started researching femicide in South Africa. And I was absolutely horrified. Some women are not even named. A woman was killed in East London, and she's not actually even named. She's just not important enough. And it is so wrong for me, this. So I started doing a lot of research on social media and in local media, newspapers and things. And I was shocked at how many women are killed and how young some of them are, and they from all walks of life. So then I decided this would be the topic for this current exhibition. And I had to find a medium that would adequately represent women from all these socio-economic different backgrounds, religions, race, etc. And I came upon the idea of using Sunlight Soap. And for me, I am outraged that these women have been silenced by someone who thought he had the right to do that. So I decided to sculpt their mouths as figuratively as possible into these bars of soap. The names are on the back with their age. A lot of the time I remember anyway. You know, the stories are so horrific. It takes me a long time. It takes about a day and a half to do one, to my satisfaction, if you like. And of course that ruined the whole idea of doing one of these for every woman that dies every day, because it's simply impossible. I mean, there are 4 women that we know of, that we suspect are dying a day, and I can only do one sculpture in a day and a half. So, yes, so that was the first thing. And then, actually inspired by someone else who disagreed with my use of naming these women. They said they felt it was, the person said she felt it was, you know, putting undue stress on the survivors, the families and the friends. And I'm sorry, but I can't agree with that. I believe that these women must be named. I want them to be remembered. I want people to see this. So the next part of this was the video behind me, where I say their names, how they died, how old they were. At the age of 24, Nikita Lewis was attacked and had acid thrown at her and was stabbed to death. And below it, on one of my very old rugs, is a whole load of Sunlight soap and other green soaps with some sculpture tools, so people can carve in their own responses, not only to the exhibition, but possibly if they know of somebody who's suffering domestic violence or someone who has been killed by femicide. They're quite welcome to contribute. And I've been really amazed. So many people have responded. It's phenomenal. The suspended mattress I found in the streets some blocks away from my home several years ago, and I knew I had to have it. I knew I would use this thing in something. So I dragged it behind me and pretended it was just following me, because it must have looked absolutely ridiculous. There I'm walking down the street hanging onto this thing that is, it's no longer a bed. It hasn't been a bed for a very long time. Anyway, I kept it outside, and eventually I decided with this exhibition I would use it, because as a survivor of domestic violence, I believe that there's certain psychological and emotional damage that simply cannot be eradicated. I've been for therapy, and it's been many, many, many years, but so I wanted to create something that, although it's not exactly in line with femicide, speaks of the damage that years and years of sleeping next to the enemy can do to a woman. And in this case, I took a very old sheet, so it's got its own history of, being used and everything. And I placed it in the garden, dragged the mattress over, that was nearly rusted to the wall, and put that on top of it, and I sprayed it with salt water every single day religiously for weeks. So the rust ran down and stained the sheet. And that was brought and installed in the gallery. The reason that I put the soap detritus on the one side is that was the side of the bed that I slept on. And I mean, I felt sick to my stomach, but I forced myself to make, it's a kind of a female's shadow. It's not really a body or anything like that. But yeah, it brought back that kind of thing. And I'm just so empathic to the women who are still going through that, who haven't left yet and maybe won't. And then, of course, the last piece, I borrowed a mortuary gurney from my friend Kiara Struvik, who also works with forensic art. And, well, nobody else wanted to lend me one. They obviously thought I was as batty as when I went to the funeral parlor that handled my mother's funeral and asked them if I could buy a death shroud from them. They actually did ask me what I wanted it for. So I told them I'm going to embroider the names of women who've been killed by their husbands, boyfriends, partners on it. The shroud itself took 2 years to do, because it just, psychologically, you just can't. You can't carry on just doing lines and lines of dead women's names, especially young people as well. It's horrible. And I did not embroider that. A friend of mine did, and she gave me hell because I refused to use mustard or yellow. I wanted that gold thread, and apparently it's an absolute nightmare to work with. It knots all the time. But it turned out exactly as I wanted it. And it is accompanied by a very beautiful Joburg singer called Marishan Laters. She went into the studio and she just vocalized a sort of lament for these women who are gone. told the engineer to switch the lights off, and she just did this vocal. And she told me that that was her contribution as a survivor of domestic violence. So yes, that is the sum total of my exhibition.